Hey all, it's KR King of D&D Homebrew talking today about how you as a GM should react when your players kick your butt, right? When they demolish some encounter you've set up or some very elaborate set piece and has all sorts of moving parts and they just smash their way through it. And I'm not talking here necessarily about an encounter that you've made where later you realize, oh, that was too easy for the players, or, they could see through this. I didn't quite do it correctly in terms of some fortress or something. No, when you looked at this, the encounter was, severe or deadly, or this was a very complex situation. And in fact, things might have gone the other way. But what can happen is I'm going to identify three things here that can cause this. One is when the players have abilities based on their character classes that render this encounter much less deadly than it would be, and they know how to use those. Another is if they, through careful planning, come across a way to render the opponent much weaker than it would be if they just did a frontal assault, right? They plan really well for something. And then the other thing is when they, in the middle of some battle, often when it gets, potentially deadly, the players have some inspired idea that you realize, if I allow this, it's going to really change things. It might even blow up this encounter. But it was an inspired idea. And as always, or a lot of times, this came from an actual encounter. I am running a Pathfinder campaign. The group is at second level. They were going through some very deadly mountains. And I had an encounter with a harpy. And a harpy in Pathfinder is level 5, which for a party of 4 second level characters is a severe encounter. It's not deadly, it's severe. And the thing about the harpy in Pathfinder, it has its song when it sings it up to 300 feet away. The players have to make a save, a will save, DC 21, which for second level characters is tough. And the way it was, we were in this ravine. I had this map, and the harpy came flying over the walls of this ravine and singing its songs. So they had to make their saves, and then it was going to swoop in and attack. And the thing about this, too, is that when the harpy, if you blow your save, it can use one action to sustain the spell, the effect each round, and continue to do 2 attacks. So this can be nasty because you have to come towards the harpy and then you stand there still. And then once it attacks you, the spell is broken, but it's going to get 2 potential talent attacks and, it can do some damage. Well, what happened here was in the group, there's a bard who has this thing. Whenever there's an audio effect, thrust at the party, they can use their will save. The entire group can choose to use, each member can choose their will save. And so he offered this up on this song. And he rolled a 17, which was 25. And so they just took it. They all said, sure, I'll take that. And they all made their save. So right away, the harpy does not have its usual, going towards them and standing still and waiting to be attacked. The other thing was I have a character that has a really good athletics. It is trained and has this trip feature where it can trip. And you can trip in Pathfinder a flying creature because the harpies flew in to attack. It got the initiative. The song failed, but it attacked one of the players, so it's engaged. This guy used his trip thing, and he got a critical success. The harpy falls to the ground, prone, takes damage, and the other players just begin beating on it, much to their amusement, right? And, I, of course, was describing feathers are flying and this harpy's cursing foul language. I always imagined that. So at the end of its turn, it went from like 60 points or something to 20. And it stood and flew away. And one of the characters had a reaction to that opportunity attack and almost killed it, but it managed to fly away. So there was an encounter that by the book is deadly, that in one round, basically they were going to kill it. And they were delighted, right? Now, what happens then? First of all, I played up the whole thing, and we all laughed at each of these abilities. And of course, the bard's like, finally, I get to use this auditory thing. Like, how often does that happen, right? And so the reaction, though, to me, I knew that it wasn't an unfair encounter. I knew that, or it wasn't, simple. In fact, you could argue it was unfair in the other way, a severe encounter. And they just had these abilities. And so what I didn't want to do, and this is what can happen when I say, what is your reaction? I didn't want to get steamed, as they say in poker, right? You lose a big hand through, let's say the other side gets lucky and kills you, and you start playing recklessly because you're steaming, because you want to make that money back. Don't then say, you think that encounter, now I'm going to have a level 6 monster or 2 level 5s. Well, that would be deadly to beyond deadly. And the players were using their ability. They have these abilities. They just happen to line up such that they won the battle. So you want to celebrate that. Even though, and the other thing that I did was I pointed out how deadly it might have been if they had made their saves. I think some people, when they rolled their saves, I believe they all missed it. They would have been the bard by himself if he didn't have that ability. So 3 of them would have been like this. So then it could have been very nasty because its talons do some heavy damage. They're second level. They don't have that many hit points. So the next one is when your players, through their planning, really get an advantage and really make what could have been a very deadly encounter much less so. And many examples of this, I think back in the time, I think that they were hobgoblins, but they had this this cave fortress that they had set up. And they had it pretty well guarded with people on the hills around it. But one of the things my players had noticed is whenever I make a cave complex, I will have a back door often. And part of this, I just feel like, yes, you could have caves. Naturally, caves just might have one entrance. But if you're going to live somewhere, like think about a house, you're not going to build your house and have one entrance because there's a fire or something, right? That's why basements, if you really want to have people stay down there, but you're supposed to have an egress point where they can get out. You don't just want to have, one entrance. So I have taken this as creatures being smart, like hobgoblins who are strategists, are going to live in a place that has a back entrance. And what the players did was they searched for this, trying to see if they saw any hobgoblins. And sure enough, over time, they saw some hobgoblins coming out of an area, and they realized where this entrance was. And what they did, they attacked and captured a hobgoblin and got it to reveal something about the complex. It wasn't a complete map or whatever, but they convinced it. They said, I will pay you all this gold and you can just get out of here. It wasn't that much, but it was enough for him to potentially betray his cohort. And they had not only a backdoor entrance, but they knew where the leaders were of this, this compound. So then they went in, they killed the leaders, and then the leadership, once that's gone, even though the hobgoblins are good fighters, they could see, I think they seized some of the stuff and got back out the back entrance before the rest even knew what was going on. So, and I had this whole elaborate setup with maps and, miniatures ready to go and everything. And they came into the back, did what they wanted to do, looted the place and ran out and got away. And I think they also maybe did something to seal the back entrance. I can't remember. But the point is, I had to sit there and watch this happen and realize that was a hell of a plan. They just came up with that. Now, could I have said, you don't see any hobgoblins leaving at all? And eventually, they're going to see you. They're going to have patrols. And I didn't say that. I thought, well, that's a good plan and it makes sense. And over the course of days, hobgoblin might leave the rear entrance. There you go. And then when I had them, they interrogated, but they just said, look, do you want money or do you want to die? And that was the choice of the one they captured. So I thought, well, that's reasonable, I mean, again, you could just say, nope, he's not going to say anything. Go ahead and slit my throat. I'm not telling you. They still know where the back entrance is. But they did this where they thought, let's get a map of this place. Let's figure out where the leadership is. Let's find out some information. So the thing gave them some information. It could have said, given them totally false information, right? And, because it's going to get the gold and be gone, or maybe go back around and betray them. And I might have done that, and I think I rolled this or whatever. But if I did do that, would the players go, well, that was a screw job? I said, it's a hobgoblin. Why would it do this for you? So there is that kind of a thing. But the point is, I didn't want to screw them. Now you're going, well, that hobgoblin, wait a minute, he's gonna take the money, give them information, and run back around and warn them. And I think they tied him up or something so he couldn't do that. But you know what I'm saying? Like, give him false information. And maybe they did that. This is a long time ago, but they did that and said, if this isn't right, we're going to come back and kill you. I don't remember. This was a very sophisticated group. So the thing here was, I didn't want to get mad, because this is not only now when you're steaming after they've thwarted an encounter, it's just over. Now we're in mid-encounter, and now it's clear to me that they've come up with this super advantage here, this super edge that's going to change this dramatically. How do I react? Well, what you have to do is react with the hobgoblins. If they have no warning, and when the player comes through the back entrance, if they don't have a sentry there all the time, which I believe is what this creature was, they're not necessarily going to see them coming in. Don't just say, well, they always have a backup sentry that comes. So they see you and sign the alarm. There you go. Haha, got the back entrance. You thought that was going to work. Really? And this is why when people are improvising, this is the great, the danger. Because when you improvise like this, do you say, well, if I just let them do all this, it's ruining, not only is it ruining a fun encounter, but it's not realistic because they would have a backup or whatever. Or are you doing that because they figured out my plan? They're going to screw over my elaborate hobgoblin thing. And I chose not to. I remember making some rolls to see if this or that or whatever, where the hobgoblin leadership was and all that. But it was a good plan, and it worked really well. And then the final one example I'm going to use is I had some players in a 5e campaign that attacked this fire giant fortress, and they had this big plan. First of all, the plan got screwed up. But secondly, they had a moment of inspiration because the reason this fire giants had taken over the stone giant compound, and the players, long time before, had rescued a stone giant that had been held in perpetual, it wasn't petrified, but it was held in the stasis field for hundreds of years. They released her, and she returned to her tribe and became like the long-lost, descendant of this queen, took over the tribe, but had been totally decimated by these fire giants. And they had been pushed out of their thing, and the players happened to go through, and they found these giants there who were terrified of these fire giants. So the players decided to help them out. And the stone giants were afraid. They didn't want to have anything to do with this. But one of the players had established this through the average sorcerer, this telepathic link and whatever. And he had this ability he had learned some Jotun, and he had learned, I think, this telepath thing and the scribe spell or something. So they're in the middle of this battle, and they screwed this thing up. The fire giants are winning. They're in trouble. The fire giants have surrounded them or whatever. And this player decides, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use this ability to communicate with this stone giant. And I'm going to give her my St. Crispin Day speech. I'm going to say, this is your chance. The giants are occupied. We've killed 2/3, but we're in trouble. If you come through that front entrance now, you can reclaim your throne. If you don't do it right now, you'll never have another chance. I mean, he really got into this. And I thought, that's kind of inspired. That's kind of a cool idea because he just came up with it. So I rolled. I did his, we used it in game sense. I didn't just go, yes, I had them roll. He rolled really well. And the giant, the queen, and one of her consorts came. Now, the other stone giants were still afraid, but they came, and they started throwing boulders. Well, I'm telling you, look at the stats on that in a 5e stone giant. Those boulders are deadly. The players got the upper hand, and they won the battle. So that is where there's a moment of inspired, like, we are in trouble, because they looked like they were going to die. And even with that, there was a point where, I think before this happened, they had gotten down to where, how the up-down thing with the death saves. They had gotten into that kind of a situation where it was very touch or go, which is what inspired the inspiring idea. So again, don't let your emotions get out of control when your players kick your butt, either through their abilities, through their planning, or some inspired, suddenly they realize they have an item, they have an ability, whatever, and they use it in such a way that you realize this is going to turn the battle, this is going to thwart me as the GM. Don't be like, that really doesn't. Don't be that GM. Just like you don't want to be that guy when you're playing. Because the thing is, these are the battles that everyone remembers. This is what we're all playing for in an RPG setting. We're playing for that moment when all looks lost, and through our efforts, we win. That harpy came over that cliff face. I'm telling you, they were freaked out. And they managed to defeat it. And that's what makes D&D so fun. And a shout out to my Patreon supporters. I really appreciate everything you're doing for me. I'm going to have some surprise things this week, my PDF and my video. I'm not going to say anything about it because I sort of want this to be for them. You'll see what happens. Or for those of you that want to sign on, I got a great idea here for this. And I just want to make sure that like I said, I love surprises. So that's what I'm going to do. If you like my channel, please subscribe. Give me some, stories of when your players thwarted your plans, totally defeated you, kicked your butt. And how did you react? Were you able to, act like an adult in that situation and not, lash out at the players? And most importantly, my friends, as always, keep playing an RPG game, whichever one you choose, and tell somebody else about it.